Well, here's one for the Tumblr crowd. Federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without authorization of the copyright holder. This infringement of copyright is called fair use, and is allowed for purposes of criticism, news, reporting, teaching, and parody. This means you.
I'm letting my cartoon review this episode for several reasons. One, I'm doing this to get my thoughts there about the Tumblr crowd before Gen Z rears its ugly head in December. Yes, I will definitely be reviewing that show when it airs. As you all know by now, I'm transgender, so seeing a show whose sole sales pitch is that they have a transgender main character voiced by a transgender woman, I am very curious as to know how well they treat her. The fact is, however, from the trailer alone, it sounds like they're going to do The Sissy, the show. But before I actually give you a legitimate video on that show, I have to wait for it to appear online as I don't actually own cable. Yeah, I'm usually a day or two behind everyone else. But again, it's not going to air until December, so we're going to wait on that. Anyway, enjoy the review.
I'm doing this episode to kind of touch on my biggest issue with raising Gazorpazorp. Originally, I was going to do Forget About It to talk about that. However, looking back at the episode I was going to touch on, it wasn't actually that bad, and I didn't want to be unfair with my review. I could keep going with my reasons for choosing this particular episode over other shows that Disney has produced for Disney Month, but I figure while I review this, you'll figure out why. But before I review this, I have one more thing to say about this episode. This is not what I would call a meh episode. I'm saying this now, but the icon of the video should hint you at, I'm very torn between calling this a crappy cartoon or an animated angel, as it hits some very interesting highs and some awful lows. But in any case, let's dive into Lloyd in Space's Neither Boy Nor Girl. It starts with the boys, Lloyd, Kurt, and Douglas, as they're eating some disgusting food. Then Eddie comes in with a radio and plays music from a band called Total Cosmic Annihilation, which just appears to be some generic rock, maybe used as a poke to the metal genre, specifically thrash metal, but whatever its purpose is, we can just call it trash nonetheless. Not that it matters, as some girls, Brittany, Cindy, and Megan, come over and yells at them to stop being immature, and then starts playing some soft new age pop artist called Aurora, which honestly is worse than the trash metal Eddie play.
I cried today when you blasted away in your big shiny rocket ship.
They then have an elitist argument about whose music is better until Brittany decides to ask a third party, which in this world would do no good, as girls and boys are stereotyped in this plot. So if they ask a girl, they'll say Aurora is better, and if they ask a boy, they'll say Total Cosmic Annihilation is better. And in comes Zoids, who does the smart thing and explain the pros to both sides, in a way that both sides think that their music is still better. The reason Zoid is not affected by the stereotype virus is due to the fact Zoid is neither a boy or a girl, and I'll explain why when we get there. And while we know it's neither a boy nor a girl, the boys and girls argue about whether Zoid is a boy or a girl, getting so curious as to follow it and observe its behaviors. When Zoid fails to use the restroom, that's when it explains its predicament, where it gets to choose to be a boy or a girl when it becomes 13 years of age. For those of you who prefer gender-neutral pronouns, let me be the first to say congratulations, you're a young prodilicon in the modern world. Have fun with that knowledge, you special snowflake. They then argue about whether Zoid will be a boy or a girl, even going so far as to say their sex is infinitely better. I believe I've already pointed this out in Raising Gazorpazor, but I feel as if neither side is better. Both have advantages and disadvantages. And there is absolutely nothing you can do about it unless you can genetically alter everyone's DNA, change the laws of biology, and completely even out the social laws by changing everyone's hormones to match one another and changing everyone's thought process to have a hive mind. But again, I've already dove into that, so I won't get into much detail again. Anyway, the boys and the girls get into a bet about what Zoid will choose to be, which fortunately sets up something that helps me get through this easier. Cut to the boys walking down the hall on a Saturday morning, talking about how much nothing they're going to do when they see the girls with Zoid trying to influence his decision to trying to win the bet. Cut to some short scenes of the boys spying on the girls, and the boys having a bit of a feminine side as well. They then decide to take Zoid on a guy's night out, which cuts to a bunch of short scenes of them having a fun day out on that spectrum. After their fun night out, the girls will catch the boys with Zoid, as hypocrites should, calls them out for influencing Zoid's choice. However, the argument that follows makes Zoid upset that they've even bet on something like that and feels understandably betrayed. The guys then feel the need to apologize, saying that how much of a jerk they should have been, and due to this, Zoid should be a girl, which at the same time causes the girls to do the same, but vice versa, which continues to upset Zoid understandably, so Zoid calls him out, saying it's its decision. Cut back to the school where the boys and girls wait for Zoid to come around and then asks what it chose to be, and Zoid does the awesome thing and does the following.
Excited? I'm not telling. What? Why not? Because it's none of your business.
So we'll never find out if you're a boy or a girl?
Oh, you'll find out someday when I get a crush on one of you. See ya!
And just like Zoid's sex, I'm very confused as to what to call this episode. As I mentioned before, it's not a crappy cartoon, but it's not an animated angel. However, it also doesn't fit the role of a mephisode, because a mephisode would imply it's par for the course, which in the case of Lloyd in Space, this episode is not. Due to all the bickering and arguing that takes place in this episode, it can get really grating to watch, and I mean really grating, like there is some form of fighting in every scene the boys and girls are in. It's also caused by some very shallow ideas of how boys and girls are, but I'll get to that later. I have to agree with Raspberry Mage on Blogspot in that this episode's execution is a wet fart to a rather fairly uninspired script centered around a single interesting idea. But that single interesting idea, alongside some actually funny jokes, does redeem this episode nicely. And while sure, the bickering can be quite annoying throughout the episode spares us the bickering by not having it last too long. I also feel like Zoid is more of a complex character than this episode leads on to be. While looking up some info on Zoid, I found that this character has been looked at as a talking point for the case against gender binary normalities, which is the polite way of saying, people love the idea of Zoid, but fucking hate this episode. But what they don't take into account is that this was made in 2002, and at that time, was touching on a subject very few people actually cared about. Back then, boys versus girls was common. Maybe it's just the fact I was born in 1997, but I remember a lot of commercials for a lot of toys for boys that were meant to be gross and extreme, whereas girl toys were very cutesy and proper. I can say with certainty that hasn't changed much, but in this day and age, people are getting more upset about things like this than ever before. I feel this episode could have been an animated angel, as it was fairly groundbreaking for its time. Maybe its execution could have been better, but in the time period of 2002, nobody cared. Hell, barely anyone even knew how to react. So, it's got me on that regard. However, it could also be a crappy cartoon due to the fact it hasn't stood the test of time, and it is very obnoxious to watch. I think personally, this one, I'll leave you all to decide. I'll see you all next time. Take care. If you would like to get caught up on future reviews, there's a link in the description below to a Facebook page. Basically, all that I'm gonna tell you. I mean, you can follow it, you can get all the updates to future reviews if you care. If not, I'm not gonna force you to do it. It's all up to you.